Hours of horror inside Tadmur military prison. Here, God does not exist. This phrase was written on one of the walls of Tadmur prison, which was considered one of the most terrifying prisons under the dictatorial Syrian regime led by Bashar al-Assad and his militias. Under the regime's iron-fisted rule, prisons like Tadmur became tools for suppressing dissenters and defectors, where the most heinous forms of psychological and physical torture were inflicted on detainees. Tadmur prison was opened in 1966 and was initially intended for military personnel. However, over the years and under the rule of both Assad Sr. and Jr., it transformed into a hub of state-sponsored terror, targeting anyone who dared oppose the regime. The prison witnessed many massacres, and in a 2001 report by Amnesty International, it was described as designed to inflict the greatest possible suffering, humiliation, and fear on inmates. This horrifying tale is recounted by one of the individuals who, through sheer misfortune, found themselves serving in this inhumane place. He says, "I served as a guard in Tadmur military prison, and there was a sealed-off section of the prison that extended 7 floors underground. With the onset of the Syrian Revolution and the increase in the number of detainees, due to the regime's brutal crackdown and mass arrests of any dissenters or defectors, the regime decided to reopen this abandoned section to accommodate those defectors from the army and political prisoners. In one instance, we placed a detainee in a cell on the 7th underground floor. This prisoner was accused of defecting from the army and opposing Assad's rule, which the regime considered high treason. We could only descend to the 7th floor at specific times, and we were accompanied by a particular individual who was the only one familiar with the ancient layout of the building. The next day, we heard strange sounds coming from the lower floors. We were used to hearing the cries of children at night, but this time the sound was different, loud and increasingly powerful. We were terrified, as the building only housed the prisoner we had placed there. When we went down with some of the regime's Shabiha, militias, to the 7th floor, we found a fire in the shape of a giant human figure illuminating the dark floor. We all fled in terror. When we told the prison director what had happened, he didn't believe us. Instead, he punished us by making us stay in a cell next to that prisoner, as though it were another form of psychological torture that the regime often employed, even against its own soldiers. We were placed on the 1st floor, but even there, we were screaming out of fear. We heard the prisoner speaking to us from the 7th floor, but he was saying strange, incomprehensible words. The following day, around 100 regime soldiers and Shabiha descended to the 7th floor to retrieve the prisoner, but he was found dead. The story grew, and an internal investigation among the Shabiha was launched. However, in this oppressive regime, the goal was not to uncover the truth, but to suppress any sign of weakness in the regime's grip, even within its darkest prisons. A few months later, things grew worse. Assad's brutal suppression of the revolution continued, and the prison became a haven for even more atrocities and massacres. Despite the terrifying events I had witnessed, none were as horrific as witnessing the regime's injustice against its own people. Shortly after, ISIS seized the prison and destroyed it, as though the very ground wanted to erase everything that had happened in that cursed place.